Hello and welcome to my first YouTube video. Today we're going to talk about what would have happened if Stormwind was never fully captured during the First War. So beginning we have Stormwind, Goldshire, the other little cities. We have Westfall, Brightwood, formerly in the First War, Redridge, and Elven Forest. In Stormwind, and then there's of course the capital Stormwind. We're going to assume that Stormwind, or King of Azeroth, as it was called back then, had a few military reforms. They didn't rely as much on Medivh to save them, for example from the trolls, as well as having less corruption to make sure they're just better. We're also going to assume that Stormwind, due to having less corruption, had better connectivity between their little cities and other towns. So they built better roads with more money. And also had more money because they recovered better from the Gurubashi War. They didn't send as many soldiers, didn't die. In return, they didn't die as many. The trolls didn't retaliate as brutally, and only sacked small parts, in quotation marks, of Stormwind. We're also going to assume that with Stormwind having a better recovery and having more money, they're going to build some fortifications, especially in their deep core, so deep Elven Forest, basically in the steps of Stormwind, in front of Stormwind. So West Garrison, Goldshire, and North Abbey. Then they're also going to build fortification on Stonewatch Tower, the Red Ridge Town, Brightwood, as well as Moonbrook. So basically all major cities that existed back then, as well as, of course, putting some fortifications against the Gurubashi so they don't try anything funny. They also fortify, of course, the three corners, as it's a very important strategic position to hold. They have access to three parts of Stormwind, so Elven Forest, Redridge Mountain, and Brightwood. They're also building some fortifications around Deadwind. Yes. Now we're going to go to the Horde. Red is going to be used for the Horde, and that's of course Horde. They capture all of the Blasted Lands and the Swamp of Sorrows. That was not supposed to be there. So they capture the Swamp of Sorrows and build up their presence and march towards through Deadwind Pass, because Medivh was of course corrupted, and let them through. We're also going to assume that the orcs are less powerful because they didn't get as many people through the portal. They maybe didn't get as many Draenei back on Draenor to get as much souls out of them, and thus can send as many souls through the portal. They also have less organization, so they are just overall worse, not soldiers, but worse in coordination and battle tactics. So they of course conquer Brightwood pretty quickly, because it's very unexpected to have a massive assault on there, or on Stormwind as a whole. So they capture all of that, as I just showed you. Then they also push towards Redridge, or from the eastern flank, and attack Stonewatch, but they can repel that attack a bit, so they don't fall instantly, and it's quite a brutal battle. Then, of course, they capture it after some time, because you can't get orcs if you don't know what they are, can't defend against them. So the orcs capture it all as well and push further. We assume that now 2 to 3 weeks into the war, they have captured more territory in Brightwood, up to the farms and up to Westfall. And by now, Stormwind has built up some defenses at the crossing to Westfall, because they heard of attacks and have mobilized the army. Now it's also telling that Stormwind completely fell, and the orcs are preparing for an attack against Lakeshire. And afterwards, they of course attack it from two sides, and you can't really have an encircled town remain active, let's say, and don't get captured. So they captured after a brutal siege, which of course causes the orcs way more casualties than they would have. This also leads to the humans having more time and sending their and human refugees getting to Ironforge and Nomergan because they had more time to flee. So the information travels there more quickly, and the orcs can't really get rid of that. With the orcs also, of course, getting stuck at the three corners and not being able to push further, they have quite a brutal siege there, which continues for 2 to 3 weeks, I'd say. And while that happens, they also begin taking parts of Westworld after having broken through and encircle Moonbrook. They of course capture it shortly after because Moonbrook isn't really a defendable place. It's also quite small. Of course, the biggest in Westworld. With that, the Horde captures almost all of Westfall and basically captures all of Westfall and are now at the border to West Garrison, which of course can't break through because Stormwind has put up massive walls. With that, the orcs are basically stuck, but of course have captured large parts of Stormwind already. They have got Westfall, all of Brightwood, all of Redridge, and by now also a small part of Elwyn, because they have been able to get through the three corners and of course defeated them after some time. Then in about 2 weeks they were able to get all the way to Goldshire and get rid of Logging Camp, the lake and all of that. But of course they can't get through to Goldshire because they built up the massive walls, which of course show with the grey walls basically. And the orcs of course also try to get to the Gulbashi, which they also did in our timeline, but now they do it more aggressively, try to push deeper, and because it's competent and all, and the Gulbashi are also of course better prepared and all, and are also better because Stormwind didn't push them as hard. The orcs of course also suffer more casualties there. And now we also have a big battle at the Goldshire Wall, or Stormwind Wall, whatever you might want to call it. And that's also when the Stormwind refugees are able to get to, or diplomats, whatever, are able to get there. That's also where I show the refugees that are coming to Ironforge, so the Dwarven Kingdom, with them being able to go all the way to Taliesin, I'm not very sure. And then of course also all the way to Ironforge and Nomergan to tell them what's happened and that they need to prepare for war. So that basically wraps up the first few years of the war. Originally the war lasted 5 years, I believe, and now we're already at the 6.5 year mark, with the orcs having suffered way more casualties and more people in Stormwind living because they retreated to the core of Stormwind or fled to Nomergan and the northern kingdoms and Ironforge or the northern kingdoms. Yes. So now we're going to the other map basically. So we're going to the middle of the Eastern Kingdoms and Iron and part of the Northern Kingdoms. So there we have the route of the refugees that are coming to Ironforge from Redridge. So now that we had that, we assume that the orcs still push northwards because they have to keep moving, otherwise they will run out of resources as they can't defeat Stormwind and need to get them from somewhere and enslave more people for work or sacrifice. So they also capture all of the burning steps and the Syrian Gorge. But with the dwarves having won, they build up some fortifications before Tersema. And the orcs have to, push a bit, push harder. And the dwarves also fortified all the ways to their other parts of their kingdom, so the wetlands and deep Dunrow, so their heartland. But of course the orcs break through at some point, because the orcs are the orcs, they are massive, they're stronger than anybody else. But now they're stuck there up to the capturing all of Loch Modan, but not being able to go to the wetlands or Dunrow. But they also get through to Dunrow, as they of course are the orcs, they're strong, they can get through at some point, but they suffer way more casualties than our timeline, and dwarves are able to stop them not before Nomergan or Ironforge in our timeline, but even before the smaller towns, so they also only lose half of their deep core, basically. So they are better prepared, the gnomes are there, they help them more, they help each other more, and the orcs are stopped earlier. By now they have of course also broken through to the wetlands and have been able to capture basically all of it, because the wetlands are pretty thinly populated, there's not much of a presence, especially not during the first war. But on the Fandel span, the dwarves have of course also really reinforced themselves and build up massive defenses. If you see in World of Warcraft today, they have only fortified the city, now they have fortified the entire passage. So the orcs have trouble getting through, especially with the Arati helping them. And I also see a route of the refugees they might take. They go to Geneas, as well as, of course, it's back then still Lordaeron. So main place on Lordaeron, and also Ku'tiras. And with that, the news also reached the Arathi, and that's why they helped the dwarves. And with all of them moving through, they get spread information to all the northern kingdoms that was coming, and they need to prepare. But because of that, because of the horde being pushed back, not being pushed back, but not being as far, they don't mobilize as much and aren't as prepared as in our timeline. So now the orcs also push towards in the Arathi Highlands, but with the Arathi also being able, or the Kingdom of Erefor being able to fortify their cities, Stormguard, the orcs of course can't capture it as they did in their timeline still. With that, the orcs push towards the Great Wall. What is it again? I can't remember. The Eretor Wall. So basically they get pushed back at the big wall. After that, they can get deep into Hillspread, but they don't capture South Shore as well as other important targets. They get to them, but they can't capture them because the humans fortified them and had more time to build up the army, which they of course did, but slower. With that, they also get way more casualties, but are also still able to push quite far towards Silverpine Forest, which was also still part of Geneas. So in this timeline, because I'm a big Alliance fan, Geneas also helps earlier with more aristocrats, more pro-alliance aristocrats having more power in Guineas. With that, they push further towards the hinterlands, so the dwarves that are living there, they of course get kicked in the ass, but they still get kind of through, but they also can't really defeat them. With that, they also get towards Anderhole, but there they of course stop because it's a big city, one of the biggest cities they had, and they stopped there. Afterwards, they of course draw what happened there, and that's basically it for how far the horde gets, with a small exception. The orcs get to the trolls, so the Armani trolls, as in our timeline, as in the original timeline, and help them, or try to help them, push into Talas and destroy the Elven Kingdom. But of course they fail. They get quite far, but they of course fail earlier even, because the horde is less competent. They have lost more people. They don't have as many people, and they can capture most of the what was the Ghostlands, but they can't really get a hold of everything. But of course, they don't have a third, or technically fourth front they have to cover, which quite difficult. It's now also time that the horde is able to go through Anderhole and capture the city. But of course, also only massive casualties. And now we also have the Alliance, which I marked in blue, of the territory they have. So basically of the Plague Lands. I don't know the name. It was apocalypse, pre-Scourge. And now with the horde also pushing quite a bit deeper into Serpent Forest, King Greymane gets more pressure to act and sends in more forces. Of course, it's also as many forces in other kingdoms proportionately, but they send more as they did in our timeline. With them basically beginning to get pushed back by the elves, the Alliance. The orcs are starting to suffer quite a lot of casualties, and don't really have anything left to do. Have any troops left. The elves are pushing tape of the humans to get them out of the elven lands and destroy the trolls, or trying to destroy trolls. By now, the Alliance has also been able to get to Anderhole again and attack it from the Plague Lands and Tirisfol Glades. After a quite shorter battle than the orcs, they are able to capture it. And of course, push the orcs back. Now it's also time when the dwarves are starting to push back, after the orcs are starting to collapse in Hillspread, the hinterlands, and later also Stormwind. Alliance having been able to push back to South Shore and recapture Orterac and encircling troops there. So that's basically the position they are in right now. And we of course also have the elves pushing them back and now getting them completely out of the Ghostlands and completely getting the Plague Lands back under control. The small portion they took. Afterwards, they also take begin taking troll lands, with the Horde also pulling out because they see it's a lost cause. They collapse a bit, but of course the Alliance doesn't care as much. They care about the Orcs, so they leave the trolls alone for now. And by now, of course, also the dwarves is pushed back and got encircled quite a bit of them in the hinterlands, which of course leads to massive casualties for the Orcs. They have alliances has now also begun liberating the Arathi Highlands and pushing the Horde towards the southern half of the continent, being able to connect to Stromgard and encircling more troops in the Arathi Highlands and pushing to the Fandral span. Afterwards, of course I have to clean it up now, they killed or captured a lot of the Horde and were able to get all of the Northern Kingdoms completely back under their control, and now also push towards through the Fandral span and are able to, of course, recapture it, because the Orcs are starting to collapse a bit and lose troops on all fronts. Now we also have the dwarves, of course, pushing. The Orcs have focused so much on the Northern Kingdoms that the dwarves have been able to encircle all of the troops in the wetlands, with not quite a lot of them, with few escaping on boats, which most of them are intercepted, or a lot of them are intercepted by the Couturier Navy, of course. They, of course, still have the biggest navy in this timeline. So the Orcs probably lose around 35% of their troops, and Lions have now re-established a foothold on the northern part of the southern part of the continent, if that makes sense. Afterwards, they of course also recapture all dwarven lands, with Lok Modan being fully under their control again. So they now have all of the Northern Kingdoms, as well as all of the formerly dwarven lands, as well as pushing into the Badlands and capturing them to get to have another point to attack the Syrian Gorge from, and push the Horde or Orcs even more. After that, of course, also retake the dwarven fortifications, which they built in preparation against the Orcs. Sorry. Afterwards, they now also have the Orcs, of course, fleeing to Westfall, the few that escaped, to reinforce the main front, in quotation. Of course, the main front battle-wise, but the most important front they can't really forget, because Stormwind, of course, still stands in this timeline. And Stormwind is now starting to retake parts of Elven Forest, which they push basically up to the Three Corners, and the Orcs are pretty fucked, with their lines having taken all the way up to the Syrian Gorge, and now starting to push them hard, pushing them all the way to Redridge. And now we have the Orcs, the Horde, starting to crumble at Blackrock, with the massive raid that took place in our time, and the Horde now basically collapsing back into the base or the clans. So the Blackrock clan still goes to Blackrock. Dragonmoor fleet, the few that are left, go back to the wetlands, as in our timeline. And the Stormwind now starts taking territory, of course. They take the Tower of Azura, and all the way to the Three Corners. And the Alliance, of course, also after the best battle, Blackrock takes all of the Burning Steps and all the way to the northern Redridge. With the humans now, of course, they're starting to push the Horde back massively. The Horde collapses even more into itself, with few actually remaining in Orc ranks, and it's now only being question of when the orcs collapse and not if the horde collapses. Then now the Stormwind also starts to push massively into Westfall, trying to take it all back, and of course reclaiming their rightful their kingdom, and freeing the enslaved people of Westfall, which of course also provides more food to Stormwind's army. With Westfall now being captured, the Alliance push makes it focuses on Redridge and trying to retake it, with the Alliance pushing hard into Redridge. The orcs that are encircled and can't really do things they should be doing, so farming resources, etc. And now the Alliance has also is in Redridge and has taken the path to Bradwood and are encircling Lakeshire, with them liberating it shortly after, with even more orcs being encircled, and there being quite a massive battle at Stonewatch Keep, because it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, fortification of Stormwind, even in the original timeline. And now we have the Alliance pushing into Swamp of Sorrows, into Brightwood, and from multiple sides, which of course the orcs can't really handle by now. They have basically fully collapsed, and the war chief isn't really a leading figure anymore, but a weak figure, only one that really doesn't hold any power anymore because he has failed so much. Shortly after, the Alliance of course retakes all of Brightwood and up to Deadwind Pass, as you can see here. With the Alliance also pushing into the Swamp of Sorrows, the Horde forces there are forced to retreat even more towards the Blasted Lands, and being even some of Deadwind Pass even being cut off, so even more orcs are captured. And with the orcs now basically fleeing back to Draenor, there is really no coming back for them. They're almost dead. The Horde is basically dead by now, and the Alliance is able to win the war, or has basically won the war by then. Now, of course, the Alliance has taken all of the Blastlands and has really captured the rest of the Horde that wasn't able to get back to Draenor, or was willing to still fight against the Alliance and preserve their honor. Now we have with the first and basically only war being won, the Alliance is of course partying and being happy that they won. But I'm also going to do some after war and up to the third war, or maybe even early war, classic WoW content as WoW would have developed. Now we have the Stormwind, of course, being retaken, and the dark green points are orc internment camps. So basically we have more of them because more were captured, the orcs were less organized. And of course Stormwind has a lot of them because many orcs started surrendering there, with also the bulk of the forces being in the area of the Kingdom of Stormwind. Of course there are also some in John Moreau and even Lordaeron, or the Northern Kingdoms, but of course not as many. And we also have for example, we also still have Dornhold, where Thrall was then razed by the keeper of the internment camp. But with all of the orcs being put into internment camps or fleeing back to Draenor, we now have the Alliance victorious and all of their partners, kingdoms, basically going back to peace times.